The chaos started long before the plate crashed. Everyone in the restaurant had felt it, the pressure in the air, the silent fear in the staff's eyes, and the sharp, cold presence of the millionaire's daughter walking in like she owned more than just the room. She walked with the confidence of someone who believed the world bent around her steps, and at that moment, everyone in the restaurant prayed she wouldn't stop at their table. The whispers traveled quickly, warning the new servers, reminding the experienced ones, and echoing through the kitchen like a prophecy, nobody can handle her. Nobody. But nobody expected that today, something, or rather, someone, would change everything. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread before the story continues. Your support helps us spread more heart-touching stories like this. The evening began like any other busy weekend, with the clinking of glasses and the comforting hum of soft jazz playing under the voices of families, couples, and friends. But all of that shifted the moment Isabel Hart stepped inside. She was the daughter of one of the city's wealthiest businessmen, known for her beauty, her confidence, and her deeply troubled temper. She didn't need to raise her voice to command attention. The tilt of her chin and the icy glare in her eyes were enough to silence rooms. Isabel had grown up surrounded by luxury, private schools, designer clothing, expensive vacations, but somewhere along the way, she had built walls taller than the skyscrapers her father owned. Walls of anger. Walls of hurt. Walls nobody dared climb. The staff tried avoiding her table. They remembered the last server who had accidentally placed her dish a little askew. Isabel had humiliated him so badly that he left his job the next day. Tonight, unfortunately, she wasn't alone. Seated across from her was a man who looked more tired than wealthy, clearly drowning in the pressure of entertaining her. He spoke softly, carefully, as if every word he chose might land on a mine. Despite the calm music playing behind them, their table held a storm waiting to break. Minutes later, all it took was one small mistake. The server had placed the wrong sauce next to Isabel's plate. A small error, almost laughably insignificant, but to her, it was a spark thrown into a room full of gasoline. The tension snapped. Her voice rose sharply, echoing through the restaurant. Everyone froze. Eyes turned toward her table, hearts raced, breaths tightened. She stood from her seat, leaning forward, jaw clenched, eyes burning with a mixture of anger and something deeper, something almost like pain. The young server stuttered, terrified. Plates rattled. Customers stared. And that was the moment Maya Rivera stepped in. Maya was a waitress most customers remembered long after visiting. Not because she tried to be noticed, but because she carried something rare, warmth. A simple, genuine kind of warmth, the kind that softened hard days and made people feel safe. She was used to dealing with difficult customers, but Isabel wasn't just difficult, she was a hurricane wrapped in designer clothing. Still, Maya walked toward her with steady steps and a calm expression, even as the rest of the staff watched her like someone approaching a wild, cornered animal. When Maya reached the table, she placed a gentle hand on the back of the trembling server and quietly guided him away. Isabel turned her fury toward Maya, expecting fear, but what she found was a face filled with understanding, and something else she couldn't read. That unfamiliar gaze threw her off balance, forcing her to sit down as if gravity had doubled. Maya didn't apologize in a rushed, frightened manner. She didn't lower her eyes or shrink. Instead, she simply offered a plate, the correct sauce, and a quiet reassurance that felt disarmingly sincere. The room slowly returned to its rhythm, but something had shifted. Isabel watched Maya with narrowed eyes, unsettled. Maya didn't treat her like a ticking bomb, she treated her like a human being. And that was the first strike against the walls Isabel had spent years building. After delivering her corrected meal, Maya returned once more, not with fear, not with pretense, but with an observation Isabel didn't expect. She noticed the untouched food, the restless fingers, the stiffness in her shoulders. Most people assumed Isabel's anger came from entitlement. Maya saw something else, loneliness. Deep, unresolved wounds she carried like invisible armor. Throughout the night, Maya approached the table calmly whenever needed. She didn't hover, didn't avoid, didn't flinch. Instead, she offered small gestures of kindness, a fresh napkin before Isabel even asked, a warm refill of water, a simple nod to let her know she was seen, not feared. Slowly, Isabel's expression softened. Her harsh breathing evened out. The fire behind her anger dimmed. Maya didn't lecture her or try to fix her. She simply gave her something Isabel wasn't used to, gentleness without judgment. As the meal went on, the men sitting with Isabel watched in awe. He had come expecting another disaster, another display of the chaos that seemed to follow her everywhere. But suddenly, Isabel wasn't shouting. She wasn't breaking plates or tearing into people. She was simply quiet. Still. Almost peaceful. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Toward the end of the evening, a small incident happened that changed everything. A young girl from a nearby table accidentally dropped her fork near Isabel. Before anyone could panic or expect the worst, Isabel bent down, picked it up, and handed it to her with a gentle smile. The mother gasped softly. Maya noticed. The restaurant noticed. Isabel noticed too, not the act itself, but the sudden feeling it gave her. A warmth she hadn't felt in years. As the night came to a close, Isabel stood up and approached Maya. She looked uncertain, like someone trying to speak a language they hadn't used in years. She apologized, softly, quietly, sincerely. It was clumsy, but real. Maya simply nodded, offering her a smile filled with the same kindness that had changed the entire evening. And that was when Isabel's voice cracked. The weight of years of loneliness, pressure, expectations, and emotional wounds seemed to collapse all at once. Right there in the middle of a busy restaurant, the millionaire's daughter cried, not loudly, not dramatically, but like someone finally letting go of a burden too heavy to carry. Maya didn't hug her or make a scene. She simply stood beside her, allowing her the dignity of being human. Sometimes, kindness doesn't come in grand heroic gestures. Sometimes, it's just one person choosing calm over chaos, compassion over judgment. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Kindness Thread for more emotional stories that remind us of the goodness still left in this world. Before we end, here's a small request: comment below what part of the story moved you the most. The sun spilled gold across the city's skyline that morning, but inside Nathan Hayes' heart, there was only shadow. The hum of his old black sedan filled the silence as he drove through the glimmering streets that led to the grand Cartwright mansion, home of one of the richest families in New York. Nathan wasn't supposed to be there. Once, he had stood among the elite as a decorated Secret Service agent. But after his wife's tragic accident and losing his job to grief and guilt, he'd become just another man trying to survive, driving strangers for a living, raising his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. He thought he'd seen the worst life had to offer. But that day, fate was waiting at the mansion gates, ready to test him in a way he could never imagine. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that touch the heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support helps us keep sharing stories of hope and humanity. That morning, Nathan was hired for a one-day private driver job, a charity gala at the city's most luxurious hotel. The client? Olivia Cartwright, a billionaire heiress known for her beauty, charm, and iron-willed independence. She was used to chauffeurs bowing, photographers flashing, and men flattering. But Nathan wasn't impressed. He was polite, reserved, and distant. When she stepped into his car in her silver gown, the air felt like a quiet storm. Olivia spoke little, yet her eyes kept drifting toward the rearview mirror, studying the men who refused to play along with her fame. At the hotel, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne glasses, and secrets whispered between the wealthy. Nathan stood quietly by the exit, watching through the tall glass doors as the elite smiled their practiced smiles. He was just a shadow in a black suit, invisible among pearls and diamonds. But inside, his instincts were still alive. Years of training had left him sensitive to danger, and something about the evening didn't feel right. The waiters moved too precisely. One in particular, a man with a scar across his hand, kept his eyes locked on Olivia. As the gala reached its peak, Olivia took the stage to give a speech about a new charity foundation in her late father's name. The audience applauded as she lifted her glass in a toast. The scarred waiter approached her table, replacing her drink with a fresh one. Nathan noticed. His pulse spiked. A faint chemical scent drifted through the air, sharp and wrong. And when Olivia raised the glass to her lips, something inside Nathan screamed move. He rushed through the crowd. Guests turned, startled, as the humble driver sprinted toward the stage. In a single motion that stunned hundreds, he grabbed Olivia's wrist and pulled her close, his lips pressing against hers in what looked like a shocking, forbidden kiss. The glass slipped from her hand, shattering. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. But what no one knew was that the kiss had nothing to do with romance, it was survival. Nathan had seen the poison powder on the rim of her glass. In that instant, he used his sleeve to wipe her lips clean, blocking her from inhaling or swallowing it. The next few minutes blurred into chaos. Security swarmed in, the poisoned drink was confiscated, and the scarred waiter disappeared into the crowd before being caught. Olivia, trembling, demanded answers. Nathan stayed silent, but his eyes told her everything. Later, when the toxicology report confirmed his suspicion, the truth broke across headlines: single dad driver saves heiress's life in shocking gala scene. But saving her life came at a price. The media twisted the story into scandal, calling it a romantic stunt. Billionaires whispered that Olivia had orchestrated it for attention. And Nathan? He lost his job. The company said he'd crossed professional boundaries. Overnight, the man who'd once taken a bullet for a president was branded as reckless and desperate. A few days later, as Nathan was packing his small apartment, trying not to let his daughter see him fall apart, there was a knock on the door. It was Olivia. Not in diamonds or silk, but in jeans and a simple sweater. She had tears in her eyes and gratitude in her heart. "You saved me," she said softly. "And I let them destroy your name for it." She offered him a position as her personal security driver, an attempt to make things right. He refused at first, pride holding him back, but her sincerity melted that wall. He accepted, not for money, but for the chance to rebuild. Weeks turned into months. Nathan drove Olivia to meetings, charity events, and hospitals where she donated to children battling cancer. Behind her fame, he saw a woman burdened by loneliness and guilt for the wealth she was born into, and for never knowing how to use it to truly help. And she saw in Nathan a man who had lost everything, yet still carried kindness like a shield. Slowly, friendship grew between them. She began visiting Lily, bringing small gifts and helping with her school. For the first time since his wife's death, Nathan saw his daughter laugh without sadness in her eyes. But the past doesn't stay buried for long. One evening, while returning from a fundraiser, a car rammed into theirs. Nathan swerved, shielding Olivia and Lily as metal screamed and glass shattered. When he woke up in the hospital, his arm was broken, but they were alive. Olivia sat beside his bed, holding Lily's hand, tears shining in her eyes. "You risked your life for me again," she whispered. Nathan smiled faintly. "It's just what you do when someone becomes family." From that day, their bond became unbreakable. Olivia publicly defended him, revealing the truth about the gala. The media turned. The same headlines that once shamed him now called him a hero. Donations poured into her foundation, and she made Nathan its head of security. The simple driver who once lived in shadows was now the trusted protector of a woman who had everything but no one to truly care. And yet, their story wasn't about romance, it was about redemption. Nathan never saw Olivia as a billionaire, he saw her as a person who learned to love humanity through kindness. And she never saw him as a savior, only as a man who reminded her that courage and compassion could exist in a single heartbeat. On a bright spring morning, Nathan took Lily to a park funded by Olivia's foundation. Children played, laughter echoed, and the air smelled like new beginnings. Olivia stood under a tree, watching the two of them. She smiled, not as an heiress, but as a friend who had found a family she never knew she needed. For the first time, Nathan realized that maybe life's greatest rescue wasn't the one he gave her, it was the one she gave him. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread so we can keep spreading stories of hope, humanity, and second chances. Special request, comment below, what would you have done if you were in Nathan's place that night? Because sometimes, one act of courage can change not just one life, but two souls forever. The rain poured relentlessly that evening, painting streaks across the tall glass windows of the Grand Imperial Hotel. Inside, the marble floors gleamed, and guests moved with quiet elegance, their laughter echoing faintly through the golden-lit corridors. But standing at the far end of the hall, dressed in a crisp white shirt and holding a leather bag, was a man who didn't quite fit the usual mold of a hotel guest. His name was Adrian Cole, a self-made millionaire, owner of the very hotel he was pretending to stay in. Yet that night, he didn't come as the owner. He came as someone searching for the truth. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread, because stories like this remind us that even the smallest hearts can carry the biggest lessons. Adrian had built his empire from the ground up, a man who knew hunger, struggle, and the taste of failure before he knew the sweetness of success. But lately, success had made him feel distant, detached from the people who worked for him. He heard complaints from staff, whispers of unfair treatment, and something inside him wanted to see for himself, not as Mr. Cole, the millionaire, but as an ordinary guest. He booked a room under a fake name, dressed simply, and blended in. He wanted to watch, to listen, and to understand what his people went through every day. That's when he saw her. She was young, maybe in her 20s, wearing a bright blue cleaner's uniform and yellow gloves that seemed too big for her small hands. Her face looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from more than just a long day. Her eyes, though, held something that caught Adrian's attention, quiet sadness mixed with fierce determination. Her name tag read, Emily. He watched as she moved through the hallway, pushing her cleaning cart slowly, humming softly under her breath. Every now and then, she'd glance at her phone, her lips tightening as if trying to hold back tears. Something about her expression tugged at Adrian's heart. She wasn't just tired, she was breaking inside. Later that evening, as the hall emptied, Adrian sat on a bench near the elevators, pretending to scroll through his phone. Emily entered the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, her voice trembling. She didn't notice him watching quietly from the corner. "Please, Mom, just hold on a little longer," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "The hospital said they won't continue the treatment unless we pay the remaining amount." "I'm trying, I promise. I'll work extra shifts." Her voice cracked as she tried to stay strong. "No, don't sell the house. I'll find a way." Adrian froze. The pain in her tone pierced him deeper than he expected. He saw her lean against the wall, one hand covering her face, her shoulders shaking as she cried softly. That single moment stripped away every illusion of luxury that surrounded them. He wasn't seeing an employee, he was seeing a human being carrying a storm no one else could see. He waited until she hung up, wiped her eyes, and forced herself to smile again before returning to her duties. Her strength stunned him. Most people would have broken under such weight, but she kept going, quietly fighting battles no one else noticed. That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He thought about Emily, about how many others like her worked tirelessly in silence, invisible in the world he'd built. He realized he had forgotten what real struggle looked like. Money had distanced him from the reality he once lived. So the next day, he decided to learn more. He asked questions to other staff members, listened to their worries, and the more he heard, the more guilt filled his heart. The system he created had become so focused on profit that it forgot about people. A few days later, Adrian found Emily again. She looked weaker, exhausted. He overheard her speaking to the manager, asking for an advance payment to cover her mother's treatment. The manager declined politely but firmly. Rules were rules. Emily simply nodded, thanked him, and went back to work without a word of protest. But her silence screamed louder than any complaint could. That evening, Adrian couldn't resist. He walked up to her in the corridor. "Excuse me," he said gently, pretending to be a guest. "My room could use some cleaning." She forced a polite smile, wiped her tears quickly, and followed him. Inside the room, she started tidying up, avoiding eye contact. Her hands trembled slightly. Adrian sat silently, pretending to check emails, but in truth, he was watching the quiet strength in every small movement she made. Then her phone rang again. She froze. It was her mother's doctor. Her face went pale as she listened. "No, please, don't stop the treatment," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'll bring the money tomorrow, please." She dropped the phone, covering her mouth to stifle a sob. That was the moment Adrian's heart broke. The moment that changed everything. Without revealing who he was, Adrian stood up and said softly, "Don't worry. Everything will be okay." She looked at him in confusion, eyes red from crying. He simply nodded and left the room. That night, he called his finance director and ordered an anonymous fund transfer to the hospital, covering the entire cost of Emily's mother's treatment and setting up a separate financial assistance program for all struggling employees. The next morning, the hotel buzzed with quiet whispers. Emily had received a call from the hospital, the bill was cleared, her mother's treatment would continue, and the doctor said someone had taken care of everything. She broke down in tears right there in the staff corridor, hands shaking, whispering thank you over and over, though she didn't know who to thank. When Adrian checked out that afternoon, he paused at the front desk, watching Emily from afar as she smiled for the first time since he arrived. There was light in her eyes again, a spark of hope. That sight was worth more to him than any business deal or profit margin ever could be. Weeks later, during a staff meeting, Adrian finally revealed the truth. He stood before them, no longer just their employer, but a man changed by what he had witnessed. He told them about his undercover visit, about Emily's struggle, and about how he realized that a business's true wealth isn't in its earnings, but in the people who help build it. He announced a new program for staff welfare, scholarships for their children, and medical support for their families. When he looked at Emily, she had tears streaming down her cheeks, but this time, they were tears of gratitude, not despair. The hotel that once gleamed with luxury now shone with kindness. And Adrian Cole, the millionaire who went undercover, found something far greater than profit. He found his heart again. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support helps us share more real stories that remind the world of compassion. Speech balloon special request, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Adrian's place? Because sometimes, the richest hearts belong to those who remember what it feels like to struggle, and choose to help others rise.